Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining today. We're just about to dive into our latest white paper and glean some key insights into purposeful biopharma facility design. Before we get started, I want to introduce our speakers. So our facilitator, moderator, Brian Parker. Brian has been the CEO of Gemini Bio since July 2021. With deep expertise in bioproduction and healthcare technology, Brian is a proven leader in the life sciences sector. Before joining Gemini, he served as VP and General Manager of Production Chemicals and Services for Thermo Fisher Scientific's Bioproduction Division. There, he led the commercialization of innovative products and drove the business's global expansion. Brian is passionate about helping biologic developers and manufacturers bring life-enhancing biotherapeutics to market, and in particular, working with customers to streamline and improve the efficiency of drug substance and drug product manufacturing workflows. Our speaker, Steven Sandoval, is the founder and serves as the CEO and operations head of Pharmaceutical Technical Solutions, PTSI, where he provides technical oversight and client representative support to the biotech, gene therapy, viral vector, cell therapy, T-cell CAR-T, mRNA, 503A and 503B compounding, and vaccine industries since 2010. He leverages biopharma experience in providing clients with innovative solutions to their complex problems. He continues to support pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities from detailed design and construction to manufacturing operational readiness, commissioning qualification, PAI readiness, and FDA and EU licensure. He leads his team in providing biopharma client liaison, engineering, manufacturing, process development, tech transfer, quality assurance, quality control, and reliability-centered maintenance technical consulting services. Prior to PTSI, he held various senior management positions at Amgen during his 20 years that included Director of Facilities and Engineering Operations, reporting to the Executive Vice President. Before we jump in, if you have any questions, please just put those into the chat. We'll be monitoring that and can work those into the conversation. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Appreciate all of you joining this webinar. I want to talk a little bit about this white paper we published. We decided, it's time to put something down on paper on the best practices around how we go through a design, build, qualification, and readiness for new manufacturing sites. And in doing so, we partnered with a lot of our vendors and design build vendors to suppliers like Gemini Bio is a key part of this paper as well. And the goal in this discussion today is to kind of give you a high-level overview of our process and best practices we use. And I'll jump right into it. We have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So the topics we're going to go through is our actual overview flow of best practices and how we do it. It breaks down into how we plan, how we go through conceptual, the approval process, design phase, build phase, CQV, manufacturing operatiness, releasing the site for manufacturing, and then the schedule, the high-level schedule that is the overview of it, and then in final conclusion, and then some final questions. And throughout the process, we'll be doing some questions. Recently, we just did an ISP roundtable here in San Diego with the same topic. Great interactions with both vendors and clients, some good questions. I tried to bring that into this presentation today and get moving forward on it. Okay, so to start off, client comes to me with a challenge, the ever-in challenge of, hey, Steve, we have a pilot facility. We have a phase 1-2 clinical facility. We're in phase 2. We want to build a commercial facility to meet US and EU standards. We define that scope up front, and we call that the planning phase. In this planning phase, it's very critical to really understand what their needs are. And I say needs because, as we know, in this environment, it's very costly and high levels, the schedule is very aggressive. And how do we get through that process very efficiently? So up front, we'll go through that planning mode and then building the conceptual layout of what the client needs are, a basic design narrative, a user facility, URS, and then a design build equipment vendor ROM. So we put together that concept so that when you're ready to go for approval, you have a concept, layout drawing, you have a basic design, and you have a high-level schedule and a ROM that you can present for approval. So we kind of consider that phase one. Once we gain approval from that stage, we then go into the next stage of design, where we then put it out to where we go out to bid an RFP for design. We come back with that design vendor. We start the detailed design phase. And as you know, that can be very time consuming as well. So being that we already have a concept based on the design narrative, leverage those best practices to drive design efficiently. And then we issue to the city for permitting. Next phase is build. And build can be one of those ones very aggressive. Either it's modifying a current facility or building a new facility with that aggressive timeline, not to mention long lead item and challenges there. I'm going pretty fast in this phase because when I get to these sections, I'll go into a lot more detail. Once we get to the build phase, we get occupancy permits. We then are in the CQV phase, so managing all our validation vendors, the conceptual design, all the PPQ strategies are on the CQV phase in order to prepare our facility, not only the manufacturing facility, but all the process equipment support systems to then support going into release for manufacturing. The piece a lot of people tend to forget is that you can have the best facility, best design, but if we don't establish all our manufacturing operational readiness activities, it's going to limit us for starting. If we don't have the people, the procedures, the batch records, the electronic systems all up and operational and validated, we won't be able to run that site. So that's a key part. It shows it here at the end, but it's really throughout this process. As we're going through this process, you want to make sure your readiness activities are ready. So when we get to this end date and the facility's built, we have all our manufacturing activities ready to go. So this is a good cheat sheet block flow that you can keep on your desk if you're dealing with projects today and kind of use this kind of as a guide. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the planning phase. What does that mean? So, we sit down with the client, review what their process flow drawings look like, what their process narratives are, what are the critical parameters that they're dealing with. It could be a new build, it could be an existing build, it could be a phase 1, 2 clinical facility if they're going commercial. We really want to understand what their requirements are. And then, understanding what is their platform, what is their process equipment platform and equipment list requirements for that facility, understanding the complexity. Is it drug substance only? Is it drug product? Or is it a combination of the two? Really understanding what those needs are. And then look at their high-level schedule. They could have already presented to the board and say, hey, it's going to take us X amount of time with this budget to make this facility. We really want to validate that because a lot of times we'll have to say, well, guys, if you want to hit this schedule, it's going to cost you X. If we streamline it or push it out 90 days, it'll get you closer to your run. So we really have those hard discussions around what their high-level schedule looks like, and then understand the basic design requirements, right? What are their process steps, right? How do we lay out their suites and facilities? Really work through that process to understand it. And then a manufacturing site URS, which is kind of the big picture overall of that site itself, breaking it down from the GMP warehouse to your QC labs, to your manufacturing suites, to your packaging areas, to your cryo areas, GMP warehousing, inspection, shipping, and out of the facility. So really understanding what those needs are, we define that up front so that when we end up going to the next phase of design, we already understand that. But I think a bigger part to this is, let's say, Steve, phase 1, we're going to only have 2 production suites, an upstream and a downstream. But we want to be able to grow 4 more phases. So I'm going to need to have 8 more suites. So we'll lay that out and actually design the amount of square foot in that facility so that when we go to those next phases, it's already planned out. So we understand what that is. We can actually cost that out as well. So if you want to go, let's say there's 1 other phase or 2 other phases, we'll actually lay those areas out and cost it. But really realize when we go for funding and approval, we're only talking phase 1. So a lot of times, like right now, I'm doing 3 phases of a project, and we got approval for phase 1. By the time we were in construction for phase 1, phase 2 was approved, and we started with that design, and now phase 3 is approved, and we're going with it. So that one, the client really went pretty fast in establishing the phases. A lot of times, these are phases that can go over a 2 to 3 to 5 year phase, and it's all part of your supply chain strategy. So that's another key point here, supply chain strategy. What is your long-term goal? What is your immediate first year, 2 year, and all the way to 5 and 10 year program? What does that look like for you? Because if we pick a building for you, you want to make sure it can handle your future needs. So that's all part of that planning mode. Um, so also verifying what's your site requirements. Do you want a greenfield and a brownfield? So a greenfield would be we're just buying land and we have to build it from scratch. There's a lot of flexibility there, but it also adds 12 to 16 months on your facility. Brownfield is a building, it could be a large warehouse, 40-foot high by 50,000 or 150,000 square feet based on your needs. We identify what you're going for, and that really helps you on the schedule. Sometimes greenfields gives you a little bit more flexibility, but it costs you time. Or a brownfield, you can save time. So that comes all the way down to those discussions early on your schedule. Then we want to clarify, are you going to purchase this land or lease? And if you're going to lease, are you going to lease with an option to buy? I always try to plan that in because you could be investing $20 to $100 million into a lease facility. If you don't negotiate an option to buy up front, it's a lot harder down the road. So that's something to definitely know. Some people already have the land already, so they're already going down the pathway of a greenfield. But updating their schedule, you say, okay, well, realize we have at least 12 months just to build that facility, to build your internal into next phase. So we have those hard discussions up front. Laying out the architectural concept drawings is critical. We even do in this phase rendering, right? So if you have, when you look at it all on an architectural layout, it's great on a flat line. When you go three-dimensional with it, it really gives you some clarity so you can actually walk through your production suites or your admin area or your QC labs. It just helps sell that process a little bit better. And that's all part of the process up front. You want to have that just so it's a good selling point for your project. Identifying project scope of work, making sure we hold those boundaries. Because we get into detailed design, then all of a sudden your design team is starting going down these pathways left and right. So you go into design, you got a ROM of 20 million, you come out of design and it's 30 million. You don't want to be surprised on that last day. So on your planning phase, you define that up front. What are the boundaries? What is your scope of work? And if we go outside of that scope of work, then we'll have to take a step back and escalate the governance for approval. High-level project schedule, we validate that schedule, all aspects of it from beginning to end, and even look at in your supply chain strategy 2 or 3 or 4 year down the road as it can relate to the project. And then, of course, establishing that budget and bringing that to the team. Leveraging our building owners and broker network for site selection. We're doing that today. Today is a great environment for owners looking for buildings. There's a lot of buildings out there. There's also a lot of buildings out there that have been built in the biopharma. There's clean room space in there, but does that meet our requirements? So we help you in a site selection mode in this phase to understand what that building needs are, and then actually go out there and help you with these brokers. We have established brokers that will help you find that right building and do those site inspections to make sure we know what we're going to be designing for. Sometimes that happens in this phase. A lot of times that happens in the design phase since we know what we're going for. But when you hit design 100%, you want to know what your footprint looks like before we start design. So that building selection is a critical piece here. Negotiating with a building owner on establishing TI allowance. TI allowances today are pretty amazing. I was in Bio last week. I met with a bunch of building owners. A lot of buildings out there today across the US. Great opportunities for our clients. So that'll help us, establishing what your CapEx strategy is. What is your spend? That's the other piece. When am I going to be spending this money? And doing that cash flow layout, when it's commitment, and what that cash flow look like. We'll build that in this phase too, because when you go present your business plan, you want a slide that shows that, because you're going to be asked that question. A lot of cases, I'll have clients that are innovators coming with phase 1, 2, and they want to invest, 15, 25 million into a pilot facility. We try to understand what those needs are and requirements. And we ask the question around, do we want an option to give you to a CDMO? Get a CDMO option, what it would take to actually tech transfer that into a CDMO. What are the costs per run? What does your production forecast look like? And we give you an option there, because in early phase clinical trials, the numbers are as high as 60% of these innovators coming in don't make it to that next round. So why invest that capital money too far up front? Invest that money in tech transfer up front. Then when you get into phase 2 with good data, then we go down the path of building your phase 2 to commercial site. and then we commercialize with a CDMO. So it's not that whole supply chain strategy is really in the planning phase.
Hey, Steve, before you move on, I just want to, well, on the building side, sounds like there's an opportunity, right? Yet TI allowances, to get a good deal, but the overall market is a little bit challenged, right? From a financing standpoint. Do you have any, I guess, words of wisdom on helping your clients address questions from their board, their investors, with regards to making these investments?
Great question. Yeah. What we do as a third party, and a lot of times I'll even come to board meetings with the CEO to help present this as a third party that's been doing this over 30 years. We come together with a lot of times people come for money without a conceptual design layout, without a basic design narrative, without very tight boundaries around what the scope of work is, the high level schedule, and haven't done the interaction with the building owners to look at what that's going to cost. But even better than that, as we use our estimating tool in this phase to come up with what the cost is, we also partner with our vendors to understand our design, our build, our raw material vendors, to understand how much and to validate those costs. So when we come in, guys, we have, and we'll even show it up there, we NDA in some of these business partners with us so that when it's presented, the board says, well, how do you know that's the number? How many times I'm sure a lot of these people on the boards have come to it where it's 30 million, then all of a sudden they get out of design and now it's 40 million, right? So that's where this additional backup helps the client justify it. And, I usually prep the C team to go do it, or they'll bring us in to help them as a third party to recommend it. So that's a great question. And it's something that we have to do better. To get funds today wasn't like what it was 2 years ago. If you said cell or gene therapy, here's $40 million. Well, you can't do that today. Even good data is struggling to get funding.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. So let's get into continues on with the concept phase, right? So you're going to have a deliverable on a conceptual phase with a conceptual design that shows the drawings, it shows the material, it shows the product, the waste, personnel flows throughout your facility. You have a very defined basic design narrative written that then supports a project ROM plus or minus 25% with a high level schedule that is there as backup. So we got all the backup with that, plus slide decks that support it, and the people that supported the development of that. So when you go to that board meeting to get approval, or the financial backers, they can see that you've done your due diligence, right? That's a key one. That 25% doesn't mean I'm going to get all that 25% down on the high side, right? Contingency is there for a reason. There's things we don't know. So you factor it in. You never want to go back and then have to go back for more money. There's things we don't know. That's the 25%. And that's called contingency. You need to have that in place. If you don't have that, you're definitely in trouble. So that overall, in summary, would be, your site design, your build, your CQV, your readiness, ROM plus or minus 25%. In there also, we have line items in there for process equipment. In a lot of cases, on an ops side, we help the client put all the personnel required to do it. Because a lot of times they say, well, what's that personnel cost per? We have Excel tools for what it takes to run a site. And that's where, what things can we outsource? Raw material development's a big one to save money, right? So if I don't need to put boilers, WFI stills, and clean steam generators in, and I can streamline my process and outsource that to my GMP partners, saves us a lot of money in this phase. And if I don't have to make my own WFI, my own clean steam, if I don't have to make my own media, my buffers, my purified water, and I outsource that to pre-approved vendors, it's just going to save overall capital costs. But not only that, operational costs, less resources. A lot of times these CDMOs that are all based on products coming in, if I rely on my partners to stock and store and manage those raw materials, and then I just bring them in as my campaigns come through, it's more flexibility. I can utilize that valuable process, GMP cleanroom space for critical operations, upstream, downstream, drug product filling lines, things like that, utilize this space versus bringing in some of these support areas today that are expensive to run. And when they're not running, they're still expensive to run. I mean, people are outsourcing cleaning. People are outsourcing a lot of these support areas today because it's just more cost effective for the client. Okay. All right, now we go into the approval phase. I kind of talked a little bit about that, but now we got a slide deck set up. The due diligence has been done. We've done our site selection. We understand what our building cost is going to be, brownfield or greenfield. We have our process flow drawings, process narrative in place, conceptual drawings laid out, a basic design narrative, usually a high level URS that's there as backup at that high level. They're not getting into that detail. We need this information. All these things on these check boxes here are set up to help us to go into design very quickly. But it also helps us in the deck that goes for board approval. This big one here, this ROI, the ROM, I mean, plus or minus 25% budget, the commitment and cash flow, that's a big one. And that's usually a slide that's in that deck. When do I got to commit? It's a $30 million project. How much do I need up front? When do I need it? When am I spending it? That's a critical one. And to hit those targets, you have to know what you're doing. Because if all of a sudden you commit to $5 million in the first quarter and the next one you don't need for 2 more quarters, and then the next quarter you got another $5 million, well, how did you miss that, right? So they want to see that, and they're going to hold you to that. And you need to have a PM that's overlooking this budget. And
hey, Steve, obviously, you know, we did a pretty, Gemini Bio, right? I did a significant capital project over the last number of years. You know, maybe not on this slide, but as you go through, I think really sharing your tips on how to ensure you stay within the ROM or ultimately the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, I think would be super helpful. Would have been helpful for us, I think, you know, as we sort of went through that journey, you know, ourselves building out our facilities.
It's definitely a good point. And that once we get the concept approved and the budget to proceed with the project, that's our next phase. So that's a perfect question into the next one here. When we get into the design phase, this is critical, right? So now that basic design narrative that we did up front, which is usually a 30-page item that goes through all your areas and requirements, very detailed, turns into your design RFP that we're going to send out to bid. And we send it out to bid to 3+ design build partners that we've used in the past, and we'll bid that out to them. And we're only bidding out the design phase. We're not building out the construction at this point. But in that, we don't tell them what our number is. We tell them what our scope is. And the goal here is when we go out to bid, we're getting those bids coming in, that bid assessment goes out, we present it to them, they come to our site, they understand it. Then once we get the proposals in, we did a full bid assessment process. In that process, we look at everyone and we look at those exclusions. That's a bad word to us, right? What are those exclusions in that proposal and what are by other? You get a lot of those and they all have them. And we go through that for clarity to make sure we understand what that scope is. At that point, we also have a contingency we add in here at this point in the project because there's things, it could be a change order. I hate that word, but there's change orders that happen. Steve, you know what? The governance team wants to move on with that extra suite that you wanted to put on in the future growth. We want to do it now. Okay, that's a change order. We'll see what we can do in the contingency, both from a design and construction. We maintain 2 buckets of money there in our budget that's held by a client that it needs governance approval to use, right? So that's the part where, you know, when they were doing your project there and you had, let's say it was $20 million and you had to hit this design scope, if there's flux in that design scope, there's a problem, right? So when detailed design comes out, they give us a full ROM plus or minus 10%. That's our number. That's the number that goes to the board. Okay, it's $22 million for the project. And that 10% is our contingency. And we go right with that for the rest of the project. Now, what's going to keep us in those boundaries? We're watching design, and we hold the design partner, and they know it. Guys, here's what our ROM is for construction. It's $22 million. We have to stay within that. If you see us going outside those parameters, you have to keep us in line, right? To make sure we're there, because no one wants to be surprised. The other thing here, at the end of design, we will have an updated ROM and pricing for construction. Because now we know all the details. We got a 3D model. We got everything detailed out. We know what this is going to cost us. And then from a client perspective on the readiness side, we understand we have that process equipment list. We've been lining up all the costs for that. We understand what the CQV validation budget's going to look like. So we lay all that together at this point, and then we go to the next phase. So that's under design. Now let's go into construction. This is where it gets a little bit more challenging to keep them in the boundaries. So we have regular construction meetings. We put a construction client rep PM on the ground that's overseeing the build to ensure we stay on target. Because, you know, when you do a 3D model, I'll never forget this, walking into a facility where an HVAC duct was going through the mezzanine and a WFI line did a zoop down and around. In other words, put a dead spot in it. And everyone knows process piping wins over ducting all day long. But for some reason, it was missed. Well, we caught it before it was installed. It was a change order, but it would have cost us more to reroute that 6-inch WFI line than it would be that ducting, right? So there's things like that that we catch on a regular basis. And usually the engineering facility people, clients that are out there, as well as some of the process engineering, we keep them in the loop during construction to ensure we catch things. Because, you know, what it looks like in a 3D model today, and when you get out in the field, things change. So you got to stay on top of that. So when we bid this out to a construction RFP, COVID taught us this, that a lot of the design build vendors today that don't have presence in different areas don't always win out, can't always give you the best price in reliable subs. So in here, we want to see, okay, your general contractor, who your superintendents and experience, I want to see the sub list. How long have you had a relationship with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing people up front? So we understand you do have a partnership there. A few years back, I was building in Columbus, Ohio, and you know we bid it out, and there's a lot of builds going on in Columbus. In fact, right down the street, there's a big giant Amgen plant that's there. Hims and Hers is there. Intel's there. They were building so much crazy, and I'm in a smaller client building there as well. The bidder that came out, the difference in pricing was in the millions, and the reliability was the vendors. He had partnerships for over 30 years with his MEP partners, which was great. In the end, just coming nuts on that one, was where we're on schedule, and it was a GMP construction project and under budget. Even with some additional change orders that weren't in scope, we were able to float that project on time. So that's a critical one here, because I'm sure, Brian, as things slip a little bit, things come in. If we didn't have that contingency there, let's say there's a beam there, I have to relocate and it's low bearing, and let's just say it's $1 million. Change that into that happens in a project scope like that. It can happen pretty easily. $250,000 to $1 million is nothing in the realm of a change order. So it's really that due diligence and planning up front helps you when you get to this point. Because I got to the pre-planning, I got through detailed design, and now I'm in construction execution. So that's a big part to make this thing happen. We provide direction to the general contractor throughout the project. That's a big one. And then one thing that my team does do is full electronic commissioning. So we do it on the fly. We're going through, because not everything's substantially complete at all one given time, but as they're being done, and let's just say there's weld inspections or structural inspections, and those are happening early before the overall substantial completion. We're seeing that early and catching that early. So that is a big part of success for the construction phase. CQV, this is a big one here that you need to start this up front. And that's why I say that process equipment list is a big one, right? This one can grow. And can you just put a percentage on the size of your project? You could from a high level perspective, but if I have a master equipment list, I know I got a GMP warehouse, I know I got QC labs, and I got X amount of clean rooms. I know I got a bunch of cryo that's there. I understand that scope. Then it makes it pretty easy from a building perspective to get that bucket together. You know, full facility, clean room, EMPQ, we can cost all that out and do some good estimates, plus minus. This is a big phase people forget. All of a sudden, you're building a $60 million facility and you got a $12 million CQV proposal showing up on your desk. And you go, see, that's crazy. No, I've seen it, right? Because what tends to happen, oh, let's do revalidation. You have to do this just like building a plant. What is your scope of validation? Define it. Now, commissioning, the foundation of validation, that's already taken care of by us, overseeing it from the beginning, overseeing the construction, before we lead into validation, commissioning plan, develop, commissioning activities executed, foundation done. Now the validation master plan done by this CQV partner, and we'll bid this out just like we do design or build to multiple clients. I had one that went out just recently last year that the span of dollars was between 2.8 and 700,000 to 2.8 million. It's a pretty big span. We bid to 10 companies, which is excessive to me. Typically, no more than 5. Usually, at least 3 to 5. There were a lot of people that said, "Hey, we can get you a deal." So we put them in there. It's a lot more work for all of us to evaluate that. But in there, you go down to hours worked, how many equipment, what's your allocation time? Here's the big one. Who are you using? Is it a bunch of frontline people with no senior oversight for validation? That's a big one because it's going to take you longer. In the end, hold them to a GMP, hold them to a schedule, and what we'll do is we build the validation master plan with that equipment list all laid out there. So that is set, they know exactly what that is. And when they give us the proposal, it's breaking down all of those items. So there's nothing hidden there. Right. So that's a big one from a validation perspective.
Hey, Stephen, obviously you're making the point that CQV is really planned throughout the process. How it seems to me it's often overlooked or left towards the end. What's sort of your tip, I guess, or how do you work with folks to stress the importance and get them aligned with planning the CQV, early in the process?
No, that's a great question. I think the key comes down to, from a manufacturing site facility scope of work of validation, we're doing that in the planning phase. And then when we get into detailed design, we'll call out environmental monitoring system, or we're going to call out the GMP warehouse, temperature mapping, the clean room, EMPQ. I'm doing a drug product facility right now, so we've got an autoclave and that validation. We've got a drug product line, which is very expensive to do and time consuming to do. So it's really that facility itself. We get that. It's the part that's forgotten is all the process equipment. Here's a lot that I get from clients. Steve, don't worry about process equipment. We got it covered. Well, the challenge is if it's a site that has other manufacturing areas running at the same time, they got a full-time job. So are they really looking at what it's going to take? So we use our PM lead that oversees the project to make sure we identify that master project equipment list, process equipment list. I need that for design anyways. When I'm allocating power to walls and areas anyways, and the utility loads, emergency power generator loads, UPS loads, we're already doing it. What we've done on there, that master equipment list, we put validation activities and then what is required, and we define that. And then we'll work together with, because a lot of times internal validation, usually there's a director or manager of a site. A lot of times there's not. So we'll leverage our experience and then we'll help them build that together. A lot of times when they say they got it, well, great, let us just see it, right? And then we find, what about this? Oh, great question. What about this? So what we've done is we give them a validation checklist. Here's what you should do, and let us help you with it. And we can do that with the same PM that's overseeing the entire project. It's just, I call it a step of manufacturing readiness is validation. And because the other thing with validation, don't forget about the 200 plus SOPs you got to build, right? And then your EDMS system, right? How are you managing all your documents, right? Change controls and, all of those pieces all kind of come with it, right? So that I think that's the key part to it. We ended up going with the second lowest vendor in that other project I just did. And when I went through it, and it's the times today. So if you have work today, bid it out because there's some great efficiencies from 2 years ago. The vendor that gave us the one that got the project is one of the top validation people worldwide that gave us this. And I looked at the people on the list. I know half of them. And such a great deal, right? So people are hungry. It just goes to show you, right? Where before I couldn't even get one of them touched, it'd be so much higher. It's just more efficient. But I will tell you this, we have a validation master plan built. We had a master equipment list built. Scope of work was very detailed. that drove the cost down. If you're just, here's a list of equipment, go ahead, and you don't have interaction, you don't have no planning up front, well, that vendor has to have some hours in there for that because they're going to get burned on something. They have to stay on top of it and have some time in there for it. But I think the best practice here is have a full validation master plan executed with a master equipment list with scope of work clearly defined, and you're partnered with not only validation, quality, QC, manufacturing, so everyone's agreed, here's what we're going to do. And then realize anything outside those boundaries is more money. So that's, I'll give you another example that will get us here. This takes us to media runs. It doesn't do it doesn't do PPQ runs or any of that stuff. So that's define that scope. It can, but what is that scope of work for your process? How far are you taking that down the bandwidth? Usually I try to end it once the equipment's up for manufacturing, end it there. And those other things go into the manufacturing site validation plan and budget. Because that's more ops budget there. That's not project.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's CQV. This, as I said before, this is the last one in the flow, but it's not the last one. This starts once we get out of a concept and we get into design. You need to jump onto this area, especially if it's a let's say we're a brand new site. You don't have an existing, quality manual, a QMS system already established. That's just one piece from a quality perspective. Your QC labs don't have, electronic notebooks or, data, they're doing all paper-based or any SOPs in place. Your warehousing, inventory, just take inventory. That's a whole work stream in itself. If you're implementing a material management system, if you go to extremists to SAP or down to more of the ones that are more flexible with barcoding and tagging, there's some very efficient ones out there depending on where you're at, or you're a new site to an existing and you have to utilize existing systems to go in there. That's a big one to ensure that you have a plan for this. That's why we say start in design and lay out your manufacturing operational readiness plan up front and lay it down in these areas. Manufacturing operatingness, I got SOPs, batch records. Let's not forget about training. Let's not forget about resources. When do I hire these people and that resource plan and getting them in time to run your plant? MSAT tech transfer. We're working on one from Europe right now coming to the States into a new plant. That coordination of making that happen, I've gone into a lot of sites to where, all right, so you have your tech transfer plan already ready to go. And they go, yeah, here it is. And I look at it, it's a 2-pager. Okay, well, there's some missing gaps here, right? So that's a very big roadmap playbook to implement, to tech transfer that drug in to start up. It's at the end of our plant, but let's just say I read in there and they're going, well, guys, you realize they have a 2,000-liter reactor upstream here. We only have 1,000. Oh, well, we didn't see that. And I say that because that's actually happened. And I caught it in design. And we were able to fix that situation. And what happened, since it's so dynamic in some of these processes, well, scale up's 2,000, so we had a plan for it. We're doing 1,000 today, but we're going to go to 2,000. So understanding tech transfer responsibilities is there. We have a whole checklist process on tech. We tech transfer drugs as well. So we have a whole process we use. We work with a team, that PM, who's their project manager on tech transfer. We work with that individual to ensure there's nothing missing. Supply chain, GMP warehousing, this is up front. This is all the way at concept. What is our supply chain strategy? Let's say it's a phase 2 program going commercial. Let's say it's a phase 1 that's going commercial. They're currently at a CDMO today. They're going to tech transfer into this site. We need to know that up front early because there's costs around it, not to mention schedule implications of not doing that properly. GMP warehousing. I've had clients, there's a lot of really good GMP warehousing all around the US today that you can contract, but there's nothing you still need to have a ready to, single use type GMP warehouse where you got a couple batches in there. But if we have the space, we do that evaluation. If we outsource, it's going to cost you X. If we build it internally, it's going to cost you Y. We do that up front in planning. So when you're ready to roll, you don't wait to this point and say, well, my warehouse isn't big enough. Well, we didn't do the planning up front. Yeah, that's plan up front is the key on this one, because let's just say I need to get raw materials, WFI, purified water, and I need it on this frequency based on this campaign. If I'm an innovator, I can project that pretty good, and I can work with my partners to stock that for me, but I still need to have a warehousing capability at my site for at least, and I always say a minimum of 2 runs of material there that I can go. But if you have that bigger warehouse, and if you're a CDMO, you can't predict it. You almost have to have that bigger warehouse or partner with your raw material suppliers to get some warehouse space from them and have them stock it and commit to 24-hour turnarounds on shipping and receiving. Can do that all day long. So this one, supply chain's a big one. And if you'll notice, when they're hiring new people at a site, supply chain director is one of the last. And I'm a big proponent, plant manager, F&E head, supply chain manager, QA, QC. Those are the top 5. You want to have those leaders there that can see it from the beginning and then staff their resources to support it based off the schedule. So a very big one on that one. Don't skip over. It's the 3rd bullet, but it's a very important bullet. Engineering facilities, safety readiness. That engineering head, engineering facilities director is a big one to have from the beginning. Because if not, they're going to lose some. Because in the end, this person's going to own the site, the facility, the clean rooms from reliability center maintenance programs, maintaining calibration, HEPA certs, repairs. You want that person in early enough. And then the safety program. That's a big one because construction owns safety of the site, but it's handed over to the F&E director down the road. You rather have them be part of, what is your lockout, tag out? What are the safety precautions? What's all the risk assessments that got to occur? That's all part of readiness. And that's manufacturing, engineering, QC, risk assessments, job hazard analysis are critical at this phase. If you don't have that safety person there, it's a major challenge. So that person has a dual hat, engineering facilities director, as well as owns the environmental health and safety programs. So big one there. And then also, as we validate our system, we want our CMMS system there, right? So if we're using Blue Mountain, we're integrating, we want that data being loaded during construction. So when we get done with the construction, ready to go into manufacturing, all my data is loaded, my work order system's ready to go. As I'm signing off validation, I'm signing off systems. That CMMS system is fully validated. It's ready to go. So you need that engineering facility person. I almost should put them up top, but that's just me having that person early. All right, quality policies, QMS system is another critical piece here because if you don't build your quality systems up front and early, existing sites already have it. We can just attach. The ones that don't, you want to make sure that quality head is there that can establish that early. So, every time we do a facility, we got a change control. And we establish that change control at the beginning. So that's pre-approved and we sign it off at the end. Even if you're a brand new site, a lot of people say, well, Steve, we don't even have our quality systems up. Well, you still want a change control in there to track everything. It's a good way to kind of wrap it up into a nice bow here because you start at the beginning and then you close it out at the end, which is, I think, a very critical piece. So your quality head, usually there's a QA, a QC head that will be in part that will cover both areas early and then staff their teams appropriately to get it going. Okay, quality control labs. This is a big one, and it's a very expensive one. Definitely in startup. Your environmental monitoring labs, having that up and operational for when we start up and do our EMPQ, you're talking between $300,000 to $800,000 to do an EMPQ and EM testing to outsource it. That's outsourcing people coming in to sample. That's outsourcing people doing it in the lab based on your size and complexity. Right? It's all based on square footage. We'll determine what that takes. So we can do that internally. That's great. So we put that on a critical path with manufacturing. We align it so that we can drive that through. In fact, you'll see GMP warehouse kind of trailing behind because I can still run my lab and control it or my labs. And then some of the on the in-process testing or final process release, stability testing, things like that, the QC lab control, but usually the labs built themselves are there and we're staffed so that we can do the EMPQ testing internally. Saves you a lot of money. And if not, and based on timing, in a lot of cases we can't, I allocate money in the budget for this here because it's forgotten a lot of places. Because I've come into places where, Steve, we need your help. We're doing EMPQ. This clean room is failing. We can't get it. It's multiple days of doing it. It's not working. We'll come in, look at the data, look at the risk assessments, understand what they're doing, and we go in. And I said, okay, so we audit the outplacement QC lab sampling and testing, and they were low bidder and they just don't know what they're doing. The reality of it is they didn't have a problem in their plant. What they had were personnel interactions of even just sampling were done incorrectly. So you just never know, right? So we always encourage, go to some of our pre-approved QC labs. I have a bunch all over the US that we use, or I'd rather have them have their labs ready to save money and do this. And you know what? In startup, it's great training for their QC people too. So it becomes a win-win for that.
Hey, Stephen, obviously lots of levers to be pulled here that you're covering. How much of this can you or your team, support if they haven't, I'm thinking of my own experience, right? If we haven't hired, the supply chain person or the quality lead or engineering or whatnot, is that something that you've got resources that you can place within the facility?
No, that's a great question. And we've done it. So what we'll come in, just take engineering facilities, they've forgotten, they weren't on the list to the end of the project, right? So I'll bring in one of my engineering directors that can fill the void while we cover that area, while we help them find the right person. So we have a very vast network that we work in. Life science is a very small industry.
Yep.
And if you're looking for that person, if it's quality, if it's engineering or QC, I stay in contact with a lot of different people and we'll help them. I have job descriptions built and so on. So we can help them do it. We don't do it for long term. We typically no more than 90 days. We're going to help you find someone and we'll get them in there. We'll train them and give them the keys. But what we don't want to do is wait to the end of the project. Because if you do it early on, that's great training. You want them in there early because they have their views too, right? Say I'm implementing, we've actually done it where we have a whole QMS and quality policy system we can implement. I got libraries we can just upload, but a head of quality has their little twist on it, right? So I say we can do that, but get your person first and we'll help them build those, right? So we do that. It's not long term, it's short term, but I should have a part-time job recruiting people because I help a lot of people. Really do. And I think it's good energy to put that out there to help my clients find the right people. And because usually as we're with our clients, we stay with them long term. We're there to help them on their next plant or the optimization of their current one or so. Okay. That's a great segue right into the whole resource hiring and training. We have training decks on a lot of different things in SMEs with 20 plus years experience. If it's, from manufacturing, engineering, quality, QC, we can help teams and we'll come in and we'll give training. We have training decks. We'll customize it to every one of our clients' needs, what they're looking. When you deal with cell therapy and open processing, aseptic gowning, aseptic processing, that type of thing is trained and it's physically trained in BSCs, in grade B rooms, as we're doing the scouting, sampling, and so on. We do a lot of that with our teams, but our goal is to train the trainers that then train the groups, so that we teach our clients how to fish and then we leave. We go in with a very small team, teach you how to fish, and then go. You'll bring us back for other stuff, but we don't go in. I'm a group of 20 people, right? So we come in with SMEs, we help you, and then we move on and hand you the keys, and you do well. So that I think that's the key part, helping you hire the team and train the team. And you'll see in our planning phase, I can show you an Excel spreadsheet, what size facility, what are you doing? Here's our Excel tool. I'll customize one just for you and say, here's what I would project. And I'll show month on month when you need to hire them based on your high level project schedule. Because sometimes they have them in a big bucket or maybe the wrong people coming in and I'm just going to share the best practice. Say, I see what you're doing. Let me explain why we recommend this, right? And a lot of times recommend these people. All right.
Hey, Steve, we've got about 8 minutes left. I have a question that I should have asked at the beginning because it's really more of a design question, but I'm going to ask it now just so you can kind of weave it in. And that is, we talked about the a little bit, at least, the macroeconomic environment and, how to sort of really ensure you're designing, efficiently, right? So you can get projects approved, from the board, from the investors, et cetera. But, there's the other angle is the external market as it relates to the drive to more cost efficient therapies. And you were mentioning cell therapies as an example just a moment ago with open processes. There's just a lot of push to create, a more efficient manufacturing process and other things, right, to get the cost of some of these therapeutics down. How do you approach that? How involved are you? Is PTSI in sort of that type of dialogue early on with a customer or client?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it happens all the time. I'm working on 3 facilities right now that 2 just got an FDA letter that said, "Hey, you're on the pre-approved list. The other competitor dropped out. Patients need this drug. How fast can you get your facility up and operational commercially to get there?" And the challenge is they were built a clinical facility that doesn't meet the EU, US commercial needs. So to do that, I need to take space, right? So in looking at the facility, I get the call, I look at it, I said, well, great, we have this envelope, very valuable square footage. And in some of these areas, we have utility rooms, buffer media prep rooms. We have areas that I can use to get me what I need, but I have to get rid of those. That's one example. And I outsource that through GMP providers, right? I think that's another big advantage of it. I think the other one is, you're trying to be innovative. We'll bring it up early. Okay, we're going to start off new. Just happened last week. And I'm looking at this layout in blocks. It's very high level, board level kind of thing. And I seen a bunch of those support functions there. And even a warehouse that requires a large capacity, outsource the warehouse, outsource part of it, right? Looking at the media buffer prep, let's just outsource that and get rid of that utility requirement. I don't need to put distribution loops in my facility. I can buy it and get it there. So there's certain things that you can do to upfront to give, or just say, okay, fine, if you do that, realize we need to build that cost in there. And here's that cost. Now you have 2. So what's your ROI on doing that, right? And a lot of times innovators and CDMOs have different perspectives of what that cost is. Here's a little bit more controlled production schedule versus, don't know, when is my client going to get here? What's my utilization rate? How do I get the max out of this space? And people is what they look at. So we do a lot of that modeling in the planning phase to say what makes sense. And then we give them costs for both. And I've done it both ways. And, from building the big stainless steel multi-product biotech plants where I have everything internal to single use, smaller scale, because our yields are so much better. I don't need that 20,000 liter reactor anymore. I can do it in 2. Things like that, we can get more cost effective, especially if you're early stage or even commercially. And especially if you're a CDMO. It's all about ROI, and your profit margins are so low, right? So you have to be efficient on any capital build that you're doing. And all that clean room square footage, how much money are you making out of that square foot? And it's really down to the foot. You think about it, down to the foot, yeah, okay, if I got a 4,000 square foot ballroom that I'm doing buffer media in that I could put, let's say 2 1,000 liter bioreactors with support equipment in, how much can I get out of that versus that, right? There's certain things you just have to do that modeling. That's why upfront in planning, let's understand what you're doing. And then I bring in these checklists to say, okay, let's get you a price on both ways. Because also it's not only money too, schedule. Imagine if I don't have to build that area, and that means I can go that much faster, and I have a vendor partner over here that's got the capacity and I got a contract with. That just means I cut down my capital costs, also my operational cost at that site, and I utilize my partner over here, and I'm able to smaller capital investment, less resources, and I can even better my schedule. I think that's a key one. So good question.
That's great.
Well,
I'm sorry. I took us down to just a few minutes remaining, so I apologize.
That's perfect, because we're at the end. So at the end here, you got your signed commissioning plan and summary reports, your validation plan, summary reports, and you sign up your change control. And then this is an example of what a schedule kind of looks like, very typical design, build, manufacturing, ops, CQV. And then we're at the end. So that was perfect timing. Any other additional? I covered a lot in a very short amount of time. We will be sending out these slide decks to people that have signed up. And if you have any further questions, you have our contact information here. Brian, any closing questions with 2 minutes left?
Well, I don't see anybody asking a question on the chat. If you do, hopefully it's working. I've got it open here so I can look at it. But we've got like a couple of minutes before the close. Maybe I'll ask a final question. And it's a silly one, I'm sure, because you covered so much in detail, but just big picture, what is the magic bullet, right? If you could, I guess, synthesize your guidance on how to optimize the design of a facility, right? The whole concept here is to optimize your ROI. What would that be, right? What is the pearl, the piece of wisdom that you would share?
Number one, plan. So that's why that first, when you look at the actual block flow, we talk planning phase, up there, develop that plan with a schedule and budget and stick to it. If you go beyond that, reassess, adjust plan, budget, and schedule again, right? That's number one, because then you can't hold anyone to it. If you've adjusted it because you didn't stay to that, that's on you. And I've jumped into these projects midway and had to take a step back and go back to plan every time. So that's the takeaway. Plan up front, spend that time with us up doing that planning, and then we'll go execute that plan.
Perfect.
All right. I appreciate everyone coming to this, and if we can help, or definitely see you in another one of these events, we'll talk soon. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.